Hey everybody, welcome to TNM Coaching Unplugged and Zoran Todorovic Interconnected podcast. I'm so grateful to have you all on the podcast once again. Beautiful comments from the last week when we talked with Nicola about corporate systemic transformation as well. So thank you so much for this wonderful engagement that we have so far. And today we have exciting guest all the way from Singapore. We have Han E. Lim joining us. He's a dear friend and colleague as well. I love his introduction of his website because he, has a title of Human Capital Consultant, Wellness Warrior. I love Wellness Warriors, and then Teen Doctor. That's a very interesting, a way to describe himself. Han comes from 20 years of working with high performance domains in leadership, in military, in elite sports. He uses multidiscipline approach to help his corporate clients realize their potential and achieve all-round peak performance. He also believes that peak performance comes from the flow and living fully in the moment, cultivating our courage to be true to ourselves. With that, welcome, Hani. How are you today?
Thank you very much, Zoran. It's great to reconnect and very excited to be here as your guest. I'm looking forward to the conversations as always.
Absolutely. And today we're going to talk about wellness. I think wellness is extremely important, especially in the organizational context. And that's why we have Wellness Warriors as well. We're going to also dive into the sports psychology in our conversation and how sports psychology supports leaders to be the best possible versions of themselves and have this peak performance. And we're also going to touch on the concept of what is corporate athlete. I also love that term, athlete, corporate athlete, somebody who is so well connected, balanced, and healthy that they can persevere and face any challenges in an agile and exciting ways. Yeah. So, Hani, tell me, how did you get into the wellness to begin with? Because you say that you're a wellness warrior. What is the significance of your personal journey into the wellness, and how did you arrive to this point?
Yeah, thanks for the question. My journey started when I was in the military. So I cut my teeth as a professional, as a naval officer. And I think in those days we were very busy with piracy problems around the region. And so that's where I appreciated the importance of strong leadership and this importance of resilience to be able to bounce back. Right. And so then this notion of what does it really mean to be composed? What does it mean to be really mentally fit? And of course, that ties in with wellness. So, and I think this idea about wellness sometimes comes with sort of a soft idea. We should be happy. We should be flourishing. Yes, absolutely. But it's also in the times of chaos, in adversity, we can also still be fit. We can still be, and that's another form of wellness, right? So we are able to find purpose and meaning amidst whatever conditions. So it doesn't only have to be fair weather conditions. We need to be strong in any conditions, including rainy conditions and stormy conditions. So that's really that my sense of that wellness. So how can we really be well in no matter what the sea state is, if you will? Yeah.
Exactly. So kind of being ready for everything. And I also love that you mentioned the stormy conditions and challenging conditions, because nowadays, all the leaders that you and I work with and people around the world, they're really challenged by stormy and tough conditions. The ambiguity of the workplace, the transformation, the geopolitical situation. We also have COVID behind us, really created a very tough obstacles for all of us to walk through. So that mental agility and our ability to be strong and well within those challenging times is more important than ever. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it also goes back to that fundamental notion, right? So yes, it's been a tough time and there were a lot of things that we wish it didn't happen. But at the same time, there's a very simple notion that there's always a silver lining, right? So how can we embrace this? And because there are many opportunities that are emerging, we're now maybe talking about people more, we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about the planet more, right? And we are also really reevaluating what does it mean to do business in a better way, for example. And so I think this is better late than never to be addressing some of these conversations with enterprises, with leaders and organizations. Yeah.
So let's kind of focus it a little bit more. So let's think about leaders, managers, people on all levels. They don't only need to be leaders. So we coaching and training and consulting everybody. So if we have a leader from the organization come to you and say, well, listen, I love the notion of becoming mentally strong, really well, able to persevere and work through the old challenges that I'm facing right now, but I'm struggling. There's lots of pressure, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of expectation from the business, from family, from the environment. How would you approach that? Where would you like to start? What would you say to that individual?
Well, I'll first listen like a good coach. Let them pour their hearts out, right? And build rapport and relationship, right? And I think it's important to understand where they're coming from and not be so quickly to prescribe here, you should do this, you should do that, right? I mean, I think they all have their own journeys and we don't know what they are going through. And so what does it really mean to really empathize with them, to see where they're coming from? And through that as a process, right, then trusting the process as something will emerge, right? So as we help them clarify their views, their values, their motivations, etc., and knowing that something will emerge from a learning point of view, from a perspective taking point of view, and how can we turn that into actionable insights, or insights that are actionable actually, right? So it takes time, and I do believe that there are no quick hacks when it comes to the human condition, right? So I mean, and because a lot of us is really about habits, how we think, how we act, how we behave, and so I mean, it does take time, it does take commitment. And it does help with people to support you. I mean, from a coaching point of view, from a training, from a facilitating point of view. So you don't have to, for the leaders they don't have to travel alone. And sometimes we just need to walk with them. That would be my approach.
Yeah. No, and I love it, because sometimes there's no quick hack, as you said. The human condition is human condition. We need to look into the habits, behaviors, values, beliefs, and then commitment to the transformational processes, right?
Absolutely.
So, I know that you're passionate around sports psychology. So how is sports psychology linking to this peak performance, wellness, our ability to be best possible version of ourselves?
Yeah. So in many ways, right, we're all athletes, right? In the human race, the human, right? So, and so there are actually a lot of parallels, right? So it starts with that fundamental question. So what does it take for an athlete to win? And to win sustainably. So my interest has been really look at how the repeats, right? I mean, the greats like Michael Jordan's, Federer's, etc. And of course, now we are Djokovic, right? So what was it about them that really separates, not a one-hit wonder, right? So as we understand that and we unpack that, we realize that there's actually a lot of parallels that we can apply to the workplace, right? And it's not about tennis. It's not about the ball, right? It's not about how they kick the ball. It's how they think, how they eat, how they communicate with other people, how they put together their team, how do they, what is their fundamental relationship with pressure, with challenges, for example. So all great athletes, they relish a challenge, right? And so can we say that for leaders, right? So when there's chaos, there's a difficult market, there's a difficult business situation, do we avoid, do we try to reduce the situation, or do we embrace it head on, just like a great athlete would do? So you can start to see the parallels there, right? So how they think, how do they prepare themselves, and what does it take for an individual to be composed, that the state where they are confident, they are clear, and they are also authentic as well, right? So a lot of it's about being vulnerable and being honest about it. So there are all those different parallels that we can look at that then work with the leaders to really be a corporate athlete, if you will. It's not about helping them to run a triathlon race, but bringing the best practices into
marathon. And I love this because a lot of the leaders, as you said beautifully, they relish the challenge. They embrace the challenge. So and people want to be able to run those corporate marathons in their own context, right? And when going get stuff, or they need to make a difficult decisions, or there's an obstacle in the market, or there is a war, as we say, experience. So there's all these elements that we have to take into consideration to be able to really make right decisions. So you mentioned also that the athletes and corporate athletes, they have a specific way of thinking, specific way of eating, specific way of being, specific way of making decisions. So how do you think athletes think, and how is this applicable to the corporate world?
Okay. So I think for high performance athletes, there are two things that are important, right, to point out. One of which is performance is a lifestyle,
Okay.
right? Performance is a lifestyle, and the second thing is um, this idea about periodization. So what I mean by this is rest is recovery, rest is performance, right? So for example, you go to the gym, your muscles are not built when you're at the gym. Your muscles are built when you're resting. And so how can you translate these ideas into the workplace? Right. So maybe we'll begin with the first one, right? Performance is a lifestyle. So same thing. Leadership is a lifestyle. You can't be a good leader in one particular domain and not be a terrible leader in another domain, right? I mean, the way you treat a colleague should be consistent in how you treat your other colleagues, right?
Mm-hmm.
How you show up at work should be consistent, right? And performance is a lifestyle, meaning that I want to get better. There's a growth mindset, right? So never settling for the status quo. How can I be a better leader to my organization, to my team,
Mm-hmm.
to be a better steward, essentially, right? To the privileges, the responsibilities, the resources that I've been given, and I'll never settle for status quo. All right, so that's the all in, and also understanding I may have to learn outside. I may have to be physically fit. I may have to learn how to communicate. I may have to pick up IT skills, financial skills. But this is all in the service of becoming a better athlete, if you will, in the workplace.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
And
so
go ahead.
no, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I just want to comment and highlight, there's so many beautiful terms that we're introducing today to our audience. And one of these is performance is the lifestyle. I'm just circling that as you're talking. And I just want everybody who is listening to bookmark that because it's really one of these simple statements. But when you really understand what we mean by that, performance is the lifestyle, leadership is the lifestyle, it becomes integral part of who you are, right? And
Yeah.
as you beautifully said, it's not only how you show up in your leadership life, but consistency in showing up with everybody in the same way becomes that lifestyle. So I love that term. This is what I wanted to comment. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And I also want to add, right? So the other thing is this about the notion of mastery, right? So performance, so all athletes are there to master their craft, right? And can you imagine if our corporate leaders also approach their work as mastery? It's a lifelong approach to be the best leader I can be versus just about the bottom line and making as much money. Yes, those are important, but leadership is also a craft, right? And it's a long-term view and the big picture view, right? So of course, how that translates to each individual can vary. But I think that's something that I think will be exciting and will help us be more sustainable in what we do.
I think, honey, we should invite all the leaders who are listening to this to bookmark that as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I love it.
yeah.
The mastery leadership journey in mastery of yourself and deepening up your leadership quest to become the best possible leader you can be instead of just I'm leading my team, I have a short-term goal, I have a performance, I have KPI, I have rewards, and because of that I'm a leader, right?
Yeah.
So when we approach that and apply the methodology of the athlete inside of the leadership in corporate, we see that there's a commitment, as you said, there is repetitiveness, there is deep confidence, there is a commitment to mastery of the craft, which is something
Yes.
bigger that is motivating us or them to become even better, right?
Yes, absolutely. It becomes an identity, right? It's not just a job, right? This is who we are. It's inside out. We embody it. And that gets terribly exciting, right? Because then the real full potential can emerge, right? From all the chaos and the noise, right? And we can really communicate with authenticity and connect with people, and be really good stewards of the gifts and the talents that they have at their disposal.
Right. And I always ask one tough question of the guests, and I'm going to ask a tough question. And sometimes people can answer, sometimes people can't.
We'll see. As a person mastering my craft, I will welcome it.
And the question is around the mastery. The question is master leadership. From your perspective, working with leaders, with coaching them, guiding them, mentoring them, what is the mastery of leadership? When you see somebody who is coming closer to the mastery of leadership or is displaying certain qualities, certain skills, certain attitudes, how would you define that from your perspective?
I can't think of an answer, but I'll tell you what's naturally emerging.
Okay, just go.
The phrase of Sun Tzu really comes to my mind. Know ourselves, know the enemy, the competitor, right? 100 battles, 100 victories. And not in the casualty sense, not in a fighting conflict kind of sense, right? But really being able to really be able to transcend ourselves and to be connected, to be aware of who we are, our emotional states, our values, our who we are, what's really important to us, and to be on top of that, right? And also to be open and to be vulnerable, meaning, say, for example, I don't know, right? And I think that's a very powerful part of mastery, right? Because I mean, for someone, for a senior leader, a CEO, to go to a town hall and say, I don't know, let's collaborate, let's work together, that's very powerful. But not many leaders do that, right? I mean, and so, but that's the deep understanding of what power is and what mastery is, right? To be able to connect with ourselves, and then that will then allow us to connect with other people.
Yeah,
that's my natural answer.
No, the answer was amazing because, it's good for us to define this, because sometimes when people listen to this podcast, especially younger leaders, so to say, even experienced leaders, and they now listen to this and think, all right, so my leadership journey, it's a quest towards mastery. What is mastery? And I agree with you. I think that the mastery in leadership, it's not about only tools and skills and competencies and your ability to manage teams, to develop on strategy, make decisions in the complex environments, and so on and so forth, everything that is technical part of the leadership job. I think that the true mastery in leadership quests, like you believe, that comes from knowing oneself and deeply understanding who are you as a leader, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are your area of development, how do you need to grow yourself from inside out, and they use the leadership position to be able to walk towards that path of mastery, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's something that we would really love to invite you to consider, that this is not just a job, it's the quest, it's also evocation, it's something bigger than you that put you in this position, to lead other people, to lead businesses. So it comes with a great responsibility. And I also love the quote that you use, that, knowing yourself, knowing your enemies, knowing your victories, knowing everybody. I think it comes from openness. And that piece of vulnerability that you share, that's an important piece, isn't it? Like, how can we get leaders to have enough courage to be more vulnerable?
That is a tough question.
I can ask myself, discuss it together, Well,
there are many factors to consider, right? I mean, I think we can go at it from a sort of a behavioral and an environmental point of view, right? I mean, it depends on the ecosystem, the environment, the workplace environment that they're in, right? So, for example, if the workplace doesn't celebrate openness, then of course you don't expect someone to exhibit the sort of behaviors and vulnerabilities. Whereas if you're in an environment where the top leader, the boss, the leader, the CEO, ask for help, right? Consult people, collaborate, right? Then it becomes it's normalized. In fact, it is celebrated and appreciated, right? So that's where to your question, I mean, it has to start from somewhere, right? And it starts from an individual, right? And the leaders may see it, and then they embody, they exhibit it, and then it can then cascade, right? I mean, it's as simple as that, in my opinion. Yeah.
It is simple, but even if the environment is closed, for example, a person needs to have a courage to say, let's do it. You know what I mean? Sometimes certain environments and corporate cultures and systems are much more open up to vulnerability. They actually celebrate it. And I love the words that you're using. Again, I'm bookmarking your wonderful words, that when that happens, there is a celebration. Usually leaders feel that's a sign of weakness, not knowing, being confused, being vulnerable to admit, I don't know how to make this decision. I don't know what is the best way forward, right? It's sometimes in the traditional leadership sense, you're like, okay, how can he or she leads us when they don't know where they're going? They are supposed to know, right? So we're shifting in through the leadership paradigms. And I think the new leadership paradigm that we're facing right now to decentralized world, digitalization of everything, introduction of the AI and so on and so forth, is when we are open enough to be vulnerable enough to ask for that support. And then we will be celebrated, right? And then that act of courage will be received from the space. Wow, the human.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It sort of ties in with the other point that I mentioned, right? I mean, sort of around this idea that from a performance point of view, right, less is actually more, right? And so you just, as you read my profile, there was one thing I talked about, which was flow, right? So essentially in optimal performance, right, in sports, in creative, in music, it applies at the workplace as well, right? So and people who are in flow, they are actually, it's effortless, right? And so this thing about being open, allowing things to move and not having to control, dictate, and instruct, right? And that actually reduces the chances of higher performance individually and with the team, right? And so I don't have to be the most powerful person, right? We can work together. I can be open, I can be vulnerable. And how can the energy flow, the collaboration, the dialogue flow? And when that happens, that's when performance increases, right? The collaboration, the productivity, the innovation. And so the traditional notion, even at the corporate workplace, has to shift if we really want to challenge and get to mastery and higher performance. Those are my humble thoughts.
Yeah, I completely am with you, and I see it, and I witnessed it myself in my own leadership, but also when I'm coaching and training other people. That paradigm has to shift. It's and all the beautiful quality of collaboration, contribution, dialogue, they inspire creativity and inspire innovation. And a lot of the times, especially nowadays, big organizations are challenged to innovate. They're challenged to create the new solutions. They're challenged to become more creative. And how can we become more creative with the peak performance and be in the flow? It's exactly what you described right now, in the mindset of collaboration, co-creation, and allowing ourselves to be in the flow, right?
Absolutely.
The challenge that I see sometimes also is that this ecosystem or corporate structures can be a little bit rigid, right? So when somebody is in the flow, they really need to persevere to free up that ecosystem to receive that flow. Isn't that true from your perspective, right?
Yeah. So I've been figuring out, right? So is there a way to hack flow? Is there a way to cultivate flow experiences, right? Because, I mean, maybe it's just a random thing, right? If you're lucky, it's suddenly going to happen. But I do think that in order to get into flow states at the workplace, individually, with a team, it does take effort. So we have to try. And there may be conflict, there may be strong, difficult conversations and even arguments, say about a business challenge, right? So they grapple with it. But I think the key here is that discipline, right? So it comes back to periodization, which is resting. So you can't grapple with the problem all the time. So, okay, you know what? Until 6 p.m., we're gonna fight. We're gonna sit and grapple with it. But 6 o'clock, we're all going for dinner. Gonna have drinks. Right, we disconnect with the problem, right? And so actually the ability to embrace the problem and fight and really be very effortful and even maybe stressful, but we can know when to take a step back, right? That is the power, and that's mastery, right? So that's self-control as well, because our natural habit is let's just go and try harder and harder, but harder doesn't solve the problem, right? So when we disconnect, okay, when we take a break, that's when our creativity will actually be even higher, right? So I think that's where the magic can happen. So it's not about just pushing harder, but it's actually, you know when to push, but you also know when not to push, take a step back. And so what that means for the leaders, I try, but okay, you know what, guys? Okay, let's take a break. Let's take a timeout. Just like an athlete would do.
Just like an athlete would do, to recover, to recuperate, to gain perspective. And also
you recharge, to retreat.
Retreat.
Yeah, very powerful.
So important nowadays, because the corporate culture that I'm challenged with, and especially when I'm coaching, are the cultures that are demanding consistent engagement and demanding consistent performance and demanding consistent on button, right? So how that looks, you have emails, then you have mobile phones, then you have cross-cultural and cross worldly communication. So you come back at home and then you have a message from somebody who is working in Asia or America on different time zones. So you end up being on all the time with a high pressure and expectation to perform a lot. And for me, the mastery that we're talking about, we need to know when to switch off, and we need to know when to unplug from this digital universe that is pulling us into this consistent engagement all the time, right?
Yes.
Because if you're pulled in, if you're plugged in, when are we going to get this new original thinking? When are we going to get new fresh ideas, right? When is that going to happen in our life?
Yeah. So very interesting, right? That's where actually technology can help, right? So I get that weekly digest of Microsoft that tells you how much time you have been online. There probably some AI algorithm, right, that will track it and say, buddy, you're working too hard. You need to disconnect. I can imagine this. Maybe someone's onto it already. Yeah,
that's a good idea. Maybe somebody's listening, going to charge them percentage or a creative idea. Use now, disconnect, go and have fun, be in the nature.
Go visit doors, all right?
Exactly. Exercise, move, because it's a lot of sitting as well. Yeah. But that's for me, when we talk about, connecting to the sport athlete and this corporate athlete, and we talked about mastery of leadership, which is linked to that, inspired by how athletes think and they want to master their craft. I also see what you're showing right now. It's the dimension of leadership mastery that we call wisdom. Because in order for us to be able to engage, but then to know when to let go, there needs to be a certain level of wisdom.
Yes.
Right?
Discernment and wisdom. Yeah, absolutely.
When you can follow yourself and your inner impulse instead of just pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. Because a lot of the people think that athletes push themselves rigorously, but that's not true, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Their self-control is immense, especially the great ones. They know when to push and when not to push.
Yeah. So much to learn. So becoming close to this conversation goes really quickly, like when it's interesting and fun, it goes quickly. So based on what we talked so far, Hani, what would you like our audience to play with, practice, try out, in order to reach their peak performance, in order for them to connect to the mastery of their leadership, in order for them to be able to understand that performance and leadership, it's a lifestyle. We covered so many beautiful things along the way, linking corporate athlete to sports psychology to corporate well-being. So anything that comes naturally to you that you would love our listeners to practice, apply, consider?
Yeah. I sometimes share this very simple acronym, WAIT, right? WAIT. And it's just a simple reminder, right, for all of us leaders, me included, which actually stands for a very simple phrase. Why am I talking?
Why am I talking?
So it's just a way to pause, right?
I know, so good. Why am I talking? In my case, over that, why am I talking so much? So I can add, more.
That's it.
Beautiful. So remember that, why am I talking right now? We're inviting you to consider that as if you're listening. And also my invitation to everybody, it's connect to this mastery of leadership as your quest, as your journey. Start shifting into the new leadership paradigm. And leadership is not just a job, it's the journey into the mastery of yourself. And please remember what Hani shared and what I shared as well, that knowing yourself and understanding your strengths and weaknesses actually is the journey. And that technical part of your job comes easy. Once when you know who you are, what are your core strengths, core values, what makes your heart sing, how do you inspire the team naturally, how do you lead in a natural way? When you know all of these qualities, then it's very easy to show up and be a wise leader in the quest of mastery of leadership. So thank you so much, Hani, for joining us today. For this inspiring and fun conversation. It was so much fun, and thank you so much for being so light. For everybody else, thank you so much for listening. We hope to see you soon again on this podcast. When we elevate your heart, we elevate your soul, we elevate your thinking to next level and beyond, so you can be inspired to become the best possible version of yourself. So bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.